When the last rays of sun touched Luz's now bright white fur as she grazed freely in the verdant fields while Lucas watched from the fence with tears of joy streaming down his face, the whole village understood they had witnessed the greatest miracle human compassion could achieve, the transformation of a broken heart into a symbol of hope for an entire community. But to understand how we reached this moment of pure emotion, we need to go back several months when everything began quite differently. It was a September morning when 8-year-old Lucas Miller woke up before sunrise. Something about that day unsettled him, a strange feeling in his chest he couldn't explain. He lived with his parents, Mary and Raymond, in a simple 3-room house on the outskirts of Hope Valley, a small rural community nestled among hills covered with lush forest. The family lived by selling vegetables they grew in their backyard and some occasional jobs Raymond found in the neighboring town. Lucas had always been different from other children. While boys his age played soccer or video games, he preferred watching birds, talking to stray cats, and making up stories about the clouds passing by. Mary used to say her son had a heart too big for his small chest, and Raymond, a man of few words, would simply smile proudly when he saw the boy taking care of an injured animal. That particular morning, Lucas went out to the backyard still in his pajamas, barefoot on the dew-kissed grass. The silence was broken only by the distant chirping of crickets and the gentle rustling of leaves moved by the morning breeze. He walked without a set destination, simply following his intuition, when a different sound caught his attention. It came from a thicket near the wall separating his backyard from the vacant lot next door. He approached with the curiosity typical of childhood, but also with the care he had learned observing animals. Among the tall grasses and dry branches, his eyes caught something that made his heart pound. A small lamb, whose fur should have been white, was lying on the ground in a fetal position. But it wasn't an ordinary lamb. Its skin was covered with strange bumps, like tumors sprouting wildly all over its body. Some of these protrusions had a worrisome reddish color, and others seemed to be necrotizing. The animal slowly turned its head toward Lucas, and its eyes, still bright despite the evident pain, met the boy's. It was a moment of pure connection, without words, where two souls recognized each other. The lamb emitted a weak bleat, almost inaudible, like a cry for help that pierced Lucas's heart like an arrow. "Mom! Dad!" Lucas shouted, running back to the house without taking his eyes off the animal. "There's a hurt lamb out here." Mary came out of the kitchen still wearing her flour-covered apron, and Raymond left his coffee half-finished. They followed their son to the spot, and when they saw the animal's condition, they exchanged a look Lucas knew well. It was the look they made when they didn't know how to pay a bill at the end of the month. "Son," Mary said, crouching beside Lucas, "this little guy is very sick. I don't know if we can, but he's suffering, Mom." Lucas interrupted, his voice choked. "Look at his eyes. He's asking for help." Raymond, a practical man with a soft heart disguised as a tough exterior, sighed deeply. He knew they didn't have money for veterinary treatment, but he also knew he wouldn't be able to sleep knowing they had let an animal suffer. Besides, there was something in his son's determined gaze that touched him deeply. "I'll get a rope and a blanket," he finally said. "Let's take him to Dr. Henry." Dr. Henry Carter was the only veterinarian in the region, a 60-year-old man who treated both farm animals and pets in a makeshift clinic that operated in a room attached to his house. He was known for being technically competent, but also for having a somewhat gruff and direct personality, traits he had acquired after decades of dealing with the harshness of rural life. The family carefully placed the lamb in a cart borrowed from a neighbor and followed the dirt road leading to the center of the village. Throughout the journey, Lucas kept one hand on the animal, whispering words of comfort. "Calm down, little one. We're going to help you. You'll be all right." When they arrived at the clinic, Dr. Henry was attending to a cow with mastitis. Upon seeing the Miller family with the lamb, he frowned. He knew their financial situation well and knew that complex treatment would be impossible to afford. "Let me see," he said, approaching the animal with hands still dirty from the previous treatment. He quickly examined the lesions and shook his head negatively. "This is bovine papillomatosis or something similar. The tumors are very advanced. Some have already necrosed. The animal is suffering a great deal." "Doctor," said Lucas, with a seriousness impressive for an 8-year-old, Can you try to save him? Dr. Henry looked at the boy, then at the parents, and again at the lamb. In 4 decades of practice, he had rarely encountered such severe cases. Technically, the most humane thing would be to euthanize the animal. But there was something in Lucas's pleading gaze that stirred something deep within his hardened soul. "Look, kid," he said, taking off his glasses and nervously wiping them. "I can try a few things, but I'm not going to lie to you. The chances are very slim, and the treatment will be expensive." "How much?" Raymond asked, already mentally calculating if they could afford it. "About $300 at least. Imported medications, special dressings, several consultations." The silence that followed was heavy. $300 represented almost half the family's monthly income. Mary hung her head, and Raymond scratched his beard, a sign that he was thinking intensely. It was then that Lucas did something that would forever be etched in the memory of everyone present. He pulled a cracked duct-taped piggy bank from his pocket and extended it to Dr. Henry. "I have $43 here. It's everything I saved selling lemonade at school. Will you accept it?" Dr. Henry was speechless. He looked at the piggy bank, then at the boy, and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a tightness in his chest that had nothing to do with heart problems. "You know this won't cover even 1/10 of the treatment, right, son?" "I know," Lucas replied. "But it's all I have right now. I'll get the rest later. I can work, sell more lemonade, do anything. Just don't let him die, please." At that moment, Dr. Henry had an epiphany. He remembered why he had chosen to be a veterinarian in his youth. The ideals that drove him before the harshness of life covered them with layers of pragmatism and disillusionment. He looked again at the lamb, which seemed to look directly at him with an almost human expression. "You know what?" he said, putting the piggy bank in his pocket. "Let's make a deal. You help me with the dressings every day, and we'll try to save this little guy. What do you think?" Lucas smiled for the first time since he had found the animal. "Seriously, you'll try?" "I'll try, but you have to understand that it might not work." "I understand, but at least we'll try, right?" And so began a journey that would change not only the life of the lamb, but of the entire Hope Valley community. Dr. Henry decided to name the animal Luz, a name suggested by Lucas after observing that, even in the midst of suffering, the lamb's eyes retained a special shine. The initial treatment consisted of rigorous cleaning of the lesions, application of antiseptic ointments, and a series of anti-inflammatory and antibiotic injections. Every day right after school, Lucas rushed to the clinic. He helped with the dressings, cleaned the area where Luz stayed, and above all talked to the animal. It was impressive how his presence seemed to calm the lamb. During the more painful procedures, Lucas only had to hold Luz's head and whisper stories for the animal to remain calm. "You know, Luz," Lucas said, during one of these sessions, "I was thinking about a story about a very brave lamb who lived in an enchanted forest. He had tumors all over his body, but underneath them was fur so white and shiny that it could heal other animals just by touch." Dr. Henry, who initially saw these conversations as a waste of time, began to notice that Luz actually responded better to treatment on the days when Lucas was present. It was as if the emotional connection between the boy and the animal created an environment conducive to healing. As the days passed, the news of the sick lamb and the dedicated boy spread through the village. First it was the children from Lucas's school, who started asking about Luz every day. Then, the parents of those children. In a short time, the whole Hope Valley knew the story. Mrs. Conception, owner of the local bakery, was one of the first to be touched. She appeared at the clinic one afternoon with a bag of sweet breads and said, "This is for the boy. A child who takes care of a sick animal can't go hungry." Mr. John, a retired mechanic, offered to help build a better enclosure for Luz. "A healing animal needs a decent place to stay," he justified, already measuring the space behind the clinic. Lucas's teacher, Mrs. Helen, organized a small campaign at the school. The children brought coins, small toys to sell, and even leftover medicines that could be useful. "It's important that you understand," she explained to the children, "that taking care of those in need is everyone's responsibility. It was during this period of community mobilization that something very special happened, and here, dear readers who follow these stories of overcoming in humanity, it's worth subscribing to our channel so you don't miss other touching stories like this, because we believe that these narratives of hope need to be shared and multiplied in our world. What happened was that Luz began to show clear signs of improvement. The smaller tumors began to regress, the overall inflammation decreased, and the animal began to eat with more appetite. More importantly, for the first time since arriving at the clinic, Luz was able to stand for a few minutes. Lucas was present at this magical moment. He was telling a story about flying sheep when he saw Luz struggling to get up. "Dr. Henry," he shouted, unable to contain his emotion, "look, he's standing up." The veterinarian came running and couldn't hide his surprise. In 40 years of practice, he had rarely seen such a significant recovery in such a serious case. This is unbelievable," he murmured, examining the animal with renewed care. But not everything was rosy on this journey. There were some dissenting voices in the village, led mainly by Mr. Augustus Mendonça, a prosperous farmer and president of the Residents' Association. For him, all that mobilization around a sick animal was a waste of time and resources that could be applied to more important things. "I don't understand these people," Mr. Augustus complained during a meeting at the association's headquarters. "Spending money on a sick animal while there are people who need medicine. This is a lack of priority." His speech resonated with some people, especially those who saw in Luz's story only exaggerated sentimentality. "The boy is well-intentioned," said Mrs. Marlene, wife of a local merchant, "but the parents should have refused from the beginning." Creating expectation in a child with something like this social pressure indirectly but forcefully reached Lucas's family. Some neighbors started making comments about wasting money and lack of common sense. Mary, especially, began to feel judged every time she went to the market or pharmacy. "Raymond," she said one night, after Lucas had gone to bed, "are we doing the right thing? People are talking." "Mary," Raymond replied, looking toward their son's room, "did you see the joy in the boy's eyes when he tells us that Luz ate on his own? Do you think money can buy that?" But the pressure increased when Mr. Augustus decided to take a more direct approach. He sought out Dr. Henry at his clinic one Thursday afternoon, while Lucas was still at school. "Doctor," he said, sitting down uninvited, "I came here to talk about this lamb situation. Don't you think it's time to end this suffering?" Dr. Henry, who was organizing medications, stopped what he was doing. "What do you mean by end?" "Well, doctor, you know very well. The animal is suffering, the treatment is expensive, and that family can't afford it. The most humane thing would be to resolve the situation." "Resolve how?" "You understand. An injection, the animal stops suffering, and everyone goes back to normal life." Dr. Henry felt anger rising in his chest. There was something about Mr. Augustus's coldness that deeply bothered him. "And who decided that the animal is suffering?" "You?" "Because I, who have been a veterinarian for 40 years, am seeing him improve every day." "Doctor, be realistic. How many cases like this have you seen recover completely?" It was a difficult question to answer. Honestly, Dr. Henry had never seen such a severe case show such significant improvement, but he had also never seen an animal receive as much love and attention as Luz received from Lucas. "Mr. Augustus," he finally said, "I'll tell you something. In 40 years dealing with animals and people, I've learned that sometimes medicine isn't just medicine and surgery. Sometimes it's love, it's dedication, it's believing when everyone else gives up. And you know what? I'm seeing more humanity in that 8-year-old boy than in many adults out there." Mr. Augustus left the clinic visibly irritated. He wasn't used to being contradicted, especially by someone he considered socially inferior. He then decided he needed to take other measures. The following week, he spread throughout the town that the lamb's treatment was a waste of community resources and that it was time for someone to make a sensible decision. His influence in the town was considerable, and some merchants began to question whether they should continue contributing with donations. The situation reached Lucas in a cruel and direct way. He was at Miss Conception's bakery buying bread when he overheard two ladies talking. "Poor Mary, spending what little she has on that animal. Her husband should forbid it." "That's right," Children don't understand these things. The parents should have some sense. Lucas felt the world crumble. For the first time, he understood that his fight to save Luz wasn't just against the disease, but also against the incomprehension of adults. He arrived home crying and told his parents everything. "Mom," he said, sobbing, "am I doing something wrong? Is Luz going to die because of me?" Mary sat beside her son and hugged him tightly. At that moment, all her doubts vanished. She saw that she wasn't just raising a child, but a human being with genuine values, capable of loving unconditionally. "Lucas," she said, drying the boy's tears, "you're doing the most right thing there is, taking care of those who need it. And do you know why some people don't understand? Because they've forgotten what it's like to have a heart as pure as yours." Raymond, who had overheard the conversation from the kitchen, joined them. "Son, when I was a child, my grandfather told me something I never forgot. A man is not measured by what he has, but by what he does when someone needs him. You, at 8 years old, are already more of a man than many grown-ups." These words gave Lucas new strength. The next day, he went to the clinic with renewed determination. Luz greeted him with a bleat that seemed stronger, more cheerful. Several of the smaller tumors had completely disappeared, and the larger ones were visibly smaller. "Dr. Henry," Lucas said, "do you think we could have a meeting in the square? I wanted to tell everyone how Luz is getting better. I wanted them to see it with their own eyes." The veterinarian smiled. There was something about the boy's determination that inspired him. "You know what, kid? I think that's a great idea." The meeting was scheduled for the following Sunday, in the town square. Lucas spent the week preparing what he would say, rehearsing in front of the mirror and asking his parents for their opinions on his speech. When Sunday arrived, about 50 people gathered in the square. Both supporters and skeptics were present, including Mr. Augustus and his followers. Dr. Henry brought Luz in a small cart, and when the animal was presented to the public, there were murmurs of surprise. The transformation was undeniable. The lamb that months before was almost dead, covered in necrotic tumors, now showed only a few scars and some small residual nodules. Its coat, although not yet completely white, had regained much of its original shine. More importantly, Luz stood firmly on its feet and showed interest in the surrounding environment. Lucas climbed onto a small makeshift platform, and with a maturity impressive for his 8 years, began to speak. "Folks, I know some of you think we're wasting time and money on Luz. I understand, when you see an animal suffering, it sometimes seems easier to give up. But I've learned something important these past few months. We don't save animals or people because it's easy. We save them because it's right." A respectful silence fell over the square. Even the children stopped playing to listen. Luz didn't ask to get sick. Nobody does. But when someone needs help, we have a choice. Do we help, or do we pretend we didn't see? I chose to help. My family chose to help. Dr. Henry chose to help. And look at the result. He gestured towards Luz, who was peacefully grazing in a corner of the square. "But you know what makes me happiest? It's not just that Luz got better. It's seeing so many good people helping. Mrs. Conception bringing bread, Mr. John building the fence, Mrs. Helen organizing the school campaign. I saw that our town has far more kind-hearted people than heartless ones." Mr. Augustus, who was at the back of the crowd, was clearly uncomfortable. He wasn't prepared to be publicly confronted by a child, especially in such an elegant and mature way. "But I want to say something special," Lucas continued, "to the people who think we're wasting money. You have the right to think that way, but I also have the right to take care of those who need it. And you know why? Because one day, if you need help, I hope you'll have someone like you or for Luz by your side." The statement landed like a silent bomb. Several people lowered their heads, visibly touched by the boy's words. Mary Marlene, one of the most vocal critics of the treatment, felt her eyes welling up. "I'll end by saying one thing," said Lucas, stepping down from the platform. "Luz taught me that no matter how wounded a life is, if we care with love and don't give up, there's always a chance of healing. And that applies to animals, people, and even the community." What happened next was something nobody expected. Mr. Augustus, visibly embarrassed, slowly approached the platform. Everyone fell silent, waiting for some kind of confrontation. "Boy," he said, his voice slightly trembling, "I think I was wrong." Lucas looked at him curiously, without a trace of resentment in his eyes. "I spent so much time thinking about numbers and costs that I forgot to think about hearts," continued Mr. Augustus. "You at 8 years old gave me a lesson I'll carry for the rest of my life." He pulled a $50 bill from his pocket and handed it to Dr. Henry. "This is to help with whatever is needed for the treatment, and if you need more, you can count on me." What followed was a wave of emotion that swept through the square. People who had been skeptical approached to see Luz up close and were impressed by her recovery. Mary Marlene publicly apologized to Lucas's family. Other people offered to help not only with Luz, but with any injured animal that appeared in town. But the real transformation wasn't just happening with Luz or the community. It was happening with Lucas himself. The shy and reserved boy had become a natural leader, someone capable of inspiring adults with his purity of heart and determination. Dr. Henry, observing the whole scene, felt something he hadn't felt in decades: genuine pride in his profession. Not the technical pride of an accurate diagnosis or a successful surgery, but the human pride of having been part of something bigger than himself. "You know, Lucas," he said, while checking on Luz after the meeting, "in 40 years as a vet, I've never seen anything like it. And I'm not just talking about Luz's recovery. I'm talking about what you did with the people. I didn't do anything special, Dr. Henry. I just took care of a friend." Exactly. And sometimes that's what the world needs: people who simply care. The months that followed were a consolidation of Luz's recovery and a strengthening of the community bonds that had formed during the treatment. The lamb came to live in a small pasture behind the clinic, but received daily visits not only from Lucas, but from several children in town who had fallen in love with his story. Luz became a kind of mascot for the community. His story spread to neighboring towns, and people came from afar to meet the miracle lamb and the boy who didn't give up on him. Lucas, initially shy with so much attention, soon realized he could use his new notoriety for something bigger. He began organizing small talks at school about animal care. He created a group of children dedicated to finding and caring for injured or abandoned animals. He convinced his parents to transform part of their backyard into a small makeshift infirmary, always under Dr. Henry's supervision. "Mom," he said one day, while caring for a kitten with a broken paw, "I think I want to be a veterinarian when I grow up." Mary smiled. It wasn't a surprise. She had been watching her son interact with animals for months in an almost magical way, as if he spoke a language only they understood. "Then you'll be the best veterinarian in the world," she replied, kissing her son's forehead. "Because you have the most important thing, a heart that doesn't know how to give up." Mr. Augustus's transformation was also remarkable. The man who once saw only costs and benefits became one of the biggest supporters of the town's animal protection initiatives. He financed the construction of a small shelter and even adopted 2 abandoned dogs. "You know what I learned from that boy?" he would say to anyone who would listen. "That having money is useless if you don't have the heart to use it the right way." Dr. Henry also changed. His practice, once focused only on technical and functional treatments, transformed into a center for animal care education. He started giving free lectures on veterinary first aid and even taught Lucas and other children how to do basic wound dressings. "That boy reminded me why I became a veterinarian," he confided in a colleague. "It wasn't to make money or have status. It was to take care of lives, all lives." But of all the transformations, the most beautiful was happening in the village itself. Hope Valley, once a typical community where people greeted each other politely but lived their lives in isolation, had become a place where everyone cared for everyone. When Mrs. Francisca, an elderly woman, had a stroke, the community's response was immediate. They organized shifts to care for her, brought food, and kept her company. "It was Luz who taught us," said Mrs. Conception. "If we can care for an unknown animal, imagine caring for a neighbor." When the Santos family lost their home in a fire, the whole village mobilized to rebuild it. When young Pedro broke his arm and his parents couldn't afford the hospital, they held a fundraiser that covered all the expenses. Lucas didn't just save Luz, observed Mrs. Helen, the teacher, during a parent-teacher meeting. He saved our community. He reminded us that we are a family. And so we arrive at the moment described at the beginning of this story. It was a golden afternoon in March, almost a year after Lucas first found Luz. The lamb, now fully recovered, grazed freely in the field near the school. Its fleece was a brilliant white, without any trace of the tumors that almost killed it. Lucas sat on the fence separating the pasture from the road, watching his friend with a smile of pure satisfaction. Beside him, sitting on the same fence, were several other children who had been inspired by his story to also care for animals in need. "Lucas," said Maria, a 7-year-old girl who had adopted a blind cat. "Do you think Luz remembers when he was sick?" Lucas watched the lamb for a few seconds before answering. "I think he remembers, yes. But I think he remembers the love he received more than the pain he felt." At that moment, as if understanding the conversation, Luz approached the fence and rested its head on Lucas's hand. It was a simple gesture, but full of meaning. It was a silent thank you, a demonstration of gratitude that needed no words. Dr. Henry, who was passing by returning from a farm visit, stopped his car and got out to join the group. In recent months, that fence had become an informal community gathering spot, where children and adults gathered to watch Luz and share stories. "So Dr. Lucas asked, are you still surprised by Luz's recovery?" The veterinarian smiled, adjusting his glasses. "Boy, I'm surprised every day, not only by his physical recovery, but by everything you've built around this story." It was true. What had begun as a simple veterinary case had transformed into something much larger. Luz's story had inspired the creation of the region's first animal shelter, funded by donations from the community and people from neighboring towns who had heard the story. Lucas had officially become Luz's guardian, a title the community bestowed upon him in a small ceremony at the end of the previous year. But more important than any title, he had become a living example that age doesn't define one's ability to make a difference in the world. "You know what I learned from all this?" Lucas said, still watching Luz graze. "That caring isn't about being big or small, rich or poor. It's about choosing to see suffering and deciding you're going to do something about it." Because that's the true lesson that young Lucas and Luz the lamb left the world, that no matter how small we are or how big the problems around us are, we can always choose to make a difference in someone's life. And when we make that choice, we don't just save those who are suffering, we also save a piece of our own soul and of the whole world. And so, as Luz continues to graze in the fields of Hope Valley, his story echoes far beyond the verdant hills, reminding us all that sometimes the greatest revolution we can make is simply to care for one another, without giving up, without judging, without measuring costs. Because in the end, when we offer comfort to those who need it most, life itself blossoms beside us.